And we're live. Good afternoon. Today is the council meeting for Monday, April 11th, 2022. We will begin today with a roll call, starting with Ward 1.
Good afternoon, Councillor Hanmer present.
Councillor Bodley present.
Councillor Veith present.
Councillors Freeman and Bonagor aren't with us today, so go ahead, Councillor Vasic.
I'll go ahead. Mayor Jaworski here.
Chair Henry here as well. Is Councillor Vasic present? Just checking. Okay. Okay, we'll get Councillor Vasic in here in a moment. I will begin with Territorial Acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, the land on which we were broadcasting from today, is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. And our moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we paused to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And reflecting in both of these, I note that the agenda in front of us contains a number of items that are advancing environmental remediation, that are advancing more democratic and inclusive ways of getting around our city, and on a more equitable distribution of resources to help us when summer days get hot and not everybody has the ability for respite. So I think we have an important agenda here with us today. I see Councillor Vasic is back. Councillor Vasic, can you check in with us?
Thanks. Yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Looking for disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof now, Council? Hearing none, that takes us to approval of minutes from the March 21st, 2022 council meeting. I'll look in the chat for a mover and seconder. Moved by Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Veith. We'll start the voting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Over to me, Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well. So that carries and brings us to the consent motion. Does any councillor wish to have any item removed from consent for further discussion? Seeing none, do I have a mover and seconder for the consent motion? I see it moved by Councillor Veith and seconded by Councillor Vasic. These are a number of routine annual matters related to special area levies in the Beechwoods. So we'll take the vote. Moved by, yeah, I got that. So we'll start the vote with Councillor Hanmer down in Ward 1.
Thank you. Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Mayor Jaworski's in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. That brings us down to item 8, staff reports, beginning with the 2022 Business Improvement Area Levy. Report prepared by Mary Zubert. There's no presentation associated with this one. Are there any questions, Council? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover and seconder, noting the ward councillor is not able to join us today, so the honor can go to someone else. Moved by Councillor Bodley. Seconded by Mayor Jaworski. It will start the voting again with Ward 1. Go ahead, Sandra.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. Next up, we have the 2021 tax adjustment reports. Are there any questions on this report this year, Council? I am not seeing any. I think we covered it well last year when this report came up, and they're fairly similar year over year. Who would like to move this item? Look in the chat for mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Hanmer. Seconded by Mayor Jaworski. We've got the Hanmer-Jaworski team going here, so we'll start the voting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor too. Next up, item C, the 2022 general tax levy. Any questions on this item? Seeing no questions, do I see Mayor Jaworski moving this item?
Yes, you
I'll
do.
look for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Veith. We'll take the vote starting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Mayor Jaworski is in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well. It's, looking up at a screen to see who's moving and seconding these items. It's a bit like reading tea leaves. I do miss seeing all your smiling faces. It goes so much smoother when we're watching hands go up rather than watching fingers clack on the keyboard. But here we are. So we're now at item D, RFT 20-10, Waterloo Service Center Temporary Excess Soil Storage Area Funding Transfer. That's certainly a mouthful, and it was clearly a soil full of soil that needed to be somewhere else, a little bit more than expected. Are there any questions on this item, item D? Seeing no questions, I'll look for a mover and seconder. I see Mayor Jaworski moving it. Seconded by Councillor Bodley. We'll take the vote starting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor. I'd note, just for posterity, this is the first draw out of the general operating contingency reserve since we created it. So this is exactly where it's for when stuff like this happens. So glad to see that all of this reorganizing of reserves, we're able to use it when we need it. Next up is the Weber Street reconstruction, Blythewood to Northfield funding release. Any questions, Council, on this item? All right, I see Mayor Jaworski has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's more of a comment, Councillor Henry, Chair Henry. It's just, it's really good to see this happening. I know that Councillor Veith will be moving it, but to see this reconstruction happening along Weber Street in partnership with the region of Waterloo and all the active transportation that is going to be enabled, and they're taking special care in this one to make sure that any direct closure that would affect pedestrians is hopefully taking place when children aren't in school during the summer. So it's well timed, well planned, and just thank staff and the region for this.
Yeah, certainly true. And I think this project, as well as being coordinated on timing for closures with our upcoming work this summer on Albert Street, which is again very important active transportation connections to be made. And we'll be able to facilitate the completion of the water loop across the end of Waterloo property. We've been waiting for this underground work to go ahead to be able to align and integrate with those. So I think this is all very positive news for us to be releasing. I see Councillor Veith is eagerly looking to move this item. Is there a seconder? That'd be Mayor Jaworski. We'll start the votes with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well. That carries. Next up, we have the Government of Canada Active Transportation Fund, City of Waterloo grant application. This is sort of both looking back and looking forward. Looking back to, formally approve those submissions, which were made on a timely basis by staff, and looking forward because this is looking at a number of years to queue up a number of projects, hopefully with the feds. Any questions for staff on this item or comments from council? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Certainly hoping that this work allows us to move a number of those short-term priority items along with some others from our transportation master plan forward, bringing safe and connected active transportation options to more people across the city. We'll start the vote then with Councillor Hanmer down in Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well, so that carries. Last up in the staff report section is the Splash Pads construction funding release request, which I think is very exciting. I see at least one comment from council on this. Councillor Bassick, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm taking liberties to jump in on behalf of Councillor Freeman, who I think would be really excited to see this come forward. We both had a chance to have some conversations about it with staff, and it is in Ward 4, but it's just on the outskirts of Ward 5. So it will serve a lot of people in a small, in an existing playground already on the east side. And so it's just one step towards providing splash pads, which we have a deficit of, I've learned in the last little while. And so it's really wonderful to have a place for people to go where they can cool off with their family and friends, and yeah, really exciting. So just I know that Councillor Freeman would likely have celebrated this if she were here. So I'm really glad to see this coming forward. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Hanmer, then Councillor Veith.
Thank you, Councillor Henry, through you, I too just want to add my support and enthusiasm to see another splash pad or a splash pad coming on to the west side. And I agree with the weathers that we have been having over the past number of summers. It's important that we have opportunities and locations for individuals to cool off. And I think this is a very appropriate location on the west side, and it will be enjoyed. My anticipation is by residents in both wards 1 and wards 2. So I fully support the location and the process that staff have undertaken to come up with these particular areas for our next round of splash pads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Now, Councillor Veith.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. Happy to support this. And I just want to say that the splash pad over at Elmer McCormick has been very well received by the community and the folks that live in the neighborhood. It's been busy, as you know, hasn't been open that long, and hopefully it'll be open soon. But yeah, I'm really happy to see this, and hopefully down the road we'll have more. Thanks.
Yes, indeed, it's quite gratifying, I think, Council, to see these projects, coming forward. I know we had a lot of discussion in our first budget cycle and then into our second on making sure that we could roll out this kind of community infrastructure for people across the city. These are sites that are also accessible by transit, which I think is important as we try to equitably deliver these kinds of services to more people in more places and make sure folks can get there. And certainly, I'll go back to you in a moment, Councillor Veith. Certainly the McCormick splash pad has been well used. I know that we, my kid and I used it a fair amount last summer, and I understand from Mr. Anderson that it used more water than we'd sort of budgeted for. So these will probably be just as well used and very exciting for the community, and we'll just have to monitor the operating pressure of making sure that we can keep paying for the water, since it is an indication of how well used these things are. Councillor Veith, and then we'll look for movers and seconders, so get those into the chat. Go ahead, Councillor Veith.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. I'm reminded of back when I first was on council, and the only splash pad we had was the Lions Lagoon, and at that time it cost money to go there. So we've come a long way, and I want to say now, our splash pads are maybe not as big, or certainly not as big, but they're accessible to everybody in the community because they're free. And that was something that we were lobbied for at the time. And yeah, so we've come, like I said, we've come a long way, so I'm really happy. And I'm happy to move this as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Looking for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Bodley. We'll start the vote down in Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well, so that carries. Takes us through staff reports, and we're now at item 9, public meetings. We have one informal public meeting today, and because we have an informal public meeting, it means I have this wonderful script to read. So, this is an informal public meeting to consider item 9A, zoning bylaw amendment application Z-22-04, Ian Cook Construction Limited, 695 Rupert Street. There will be no decisions made this afternoon. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should contact planner John Voss at 519-747-8527 or at john.voss@waterloo.ca, spelled as JOHN.VOS@waterloo.ca. Now, if you would like to speak at this meeting, please call the clerk's office now at 519-747-8705. The planner, John Voss, will now provide a brief overview of the application. Whenever you're ready, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to members of council, other staff, and the public that are listening in. This is an informal public meeting for 695 Rupert Street for a temporary use bylaw, application Z2204. Next slide, please. This is the location of the property on Rupert Street at the corner of Bathurst Drive in the north end of the city in the industrial park. Next slide, please. The official plan designates the property as flexible industrial, and the zoning bylaw also zones the land as flexible industrial, which permits a range of heavy industries and offices and other types of similar uses. Next slide, please. The applicant's proposing a temporary use bylaw to permit a spiritual use and or community center for up to 3 years. The purpose of this is to provide a space for the existing church at 400 Northfield Drive West to relocate temporarily while they construct a new church building. The temporary use bylaw is indicated there may include a community center as a permitted use in order to accommodate some of the various uses that may be included within the church, and also to consider some building code limitations. The applicant submitted a planning justification report in support of the application, and that report's available on the city's website. Next slide, please. Staff will be reviewing the report that was submitted by the applicant and any other comments that we'll be receiving from the public and from agencies, and are aiming to return this for council's final consideration in the coming weeks. This concludes my application at this time.
Thank you, John. Now, does any councillor have any questions for staff? Please remember, this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification may be asked. Councillor members should not express opinions at this point. Questions, council? Seeing none, let me just ask, John, we were here a little while ago with a staff-initiated official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to implement some new powers from the province in terms of delegated authority, among other matters, on certain technical planning matters. Would staff anticipate this could be one of those kinds of applications that would fit under that proposed delegated authority and sort of speed up the red tape on these kind of items?
This would be one of those sort of applications that will be considered, whether it is one that's finally recommended, specifically temporary use bylaws, which have a very limited time frame on how long they can be in place. That could be considered, but I'll leave that up to my colleagues who are doing the actual review to make a determination.
Yes, of course, hard to put one planner on the spot for another, but I think that was a fair and complete answer. Seeing no further questions from council, I will remind the public that if you would like to speak at this meeting, please call the clerk's office now at 519-747-8705. I will now call upon any registered delegations to speak, beginning with the only registered delegation, Mr. Dave Aston, representing the applicant. So Dave, the floor is yours when you are ready.
Great. Thank you, Chair Henry, and good afternoon, everyone. Not too much to add to Mr. Voss's presentation. What we're looking for is a temporary use bylaw to allow the church to locate in a portion of the building on Rupert Street, approximately 2,800 square feet of the building. Other uses will remain in place. The intent of the temporary use bylaw is to allow for coordination of site development of the church property at 400 Northfield Drive that went through the planning approvals process a few years ago. Both the church and Cook Homes are now working through the site plan approvals for development of the site. And what we found is that there's efficiency in developing the site in its entirety as a coordinated approach. But what that means is the church needs to find a temporary location because the demolition of the existing church would occur before the new church is finally constructed. So the intent of the temporary use here is to allow the church that time to continue to meet throughout the period where construction is ongoing on site for the new church to be put into place and for the opening of that facility. So again, the temporary use bylaw is what we found as the best approach in discussion with city staff, and it will work on both ends for the church and for Cook Homes so that that site can develop in a cost-effective and efficient way. So would be happy to answer any questions and look forward to working with staff to bring this back to council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Mr. Aston? Seeing none, thank you very much. I will turn to the deputy clerk to see if the phones have been ringing off the hook. Nope. Okay, so as the deputy clerk informs me there are no further speakers, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. So that takes us down to item 10, consideration of notice of motion given at previous meeting. We have none. Notice of motion, I've heard of none, and I see none. Communications and correspondence, we have none. There is no unfinished business. Are there any questions, council? Questions for staff? I see none. Is there any new business, council? I see some apparently minor new business from Mayor Jaworski. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Anderson and the entire City of Waterloo staff team. You know, we've been through this now for 2 years, and just reflecting in the calendar of what's coming up, that we have an Easter weekend coming up with 4 days of solitude for most of our staff. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank staff, certainly all staff on the line here, the clerk's office, the commissioners, Mr. Anderson, and encourage everybody to have a nice time with family and friends over this weekend. And just to say a good thanks to you, since Chair Henry is apparently the best chair of meetings ever, because we're only into minute 30, I believe. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to thank all staff and Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think council echoes that, and I know as many questions and things that are on our mind, I know we will all endeavor to not send any of them your way over the 4-day long weekend, and we would encourage folks, unless they're on call, not to look at any of those things over those 4 days and to take the respite as it is planned. So seeing no further new business, item 16, enactment of bylaws, of which there are many. Who would like to take on the heavy list of A through G? That looks like Councillor Bodley has moved it, I count, about 4 times all at once. And Councillor Hanmer is seconding that motion. So we will start the vote with Councillor Hanmer.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. Now we need someone to move adjournment. Mayor Jaworski would move adjournment. Somebody might second it. That somebody is Councillor Vassic. So we'll start the vote down in Ward 1. Go ahead, Sandra.
You make me sound like I'm so far south. I'm not that far south. Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor from way up in Ward 2.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Chair Jaworski in favor.
And Chair Henry is in favor. And just to note, I mark distance these days by how long, how easy, and how uphill it would be for me to bike my my toddler and his bike carrier out there. And so Ward 1 is a fair distance in my books these days. But then heck, I live on top of a hill, so every day is a little bit more of a challenge to get home. All right, speaking of getting home, we can do so at 2:31. Have a great week and a great long weekend, council and staff.
Bye, everyone.